hammer again, since we like to believe that we are early adopters of the idea of comic book art as art, with a capital A. Our 2006 exhibition, Masters of American Comics, which we did in conjunction with MoCA, examined some of the most influential artists working in comics throughout the 20th century, on the premise that comics are an important cultural and aesthetic practice with its own history, protagonists, and contribution to society on par with music, film, and the visual arts. The show was a blockbuster, and we followed it up with our 2009 exhibition of the work of R. Crumb. So tonight we have some of the most influential and important figures from the epic history of DC Comics and the bona fide comic book megafan Patton Oswalt to speak with them. And Patton's going to introduce each of our panelists. Patton's currently a season regular on Showtime's United States of Terra. He's also appeared as a guest star on the Sarah Silverman program and Flight of the Conchords. He's a recurring character on the sci-fi series Caprica. He's also a regular contributor to Countdown with Keith Olbermann, Real Time with Bill Maher, and Lewis Black's Root of All Evil. Patton appeared in Steven Soderbergh's film The Informant and in Observe and Report with Seth Rogen. On TV, he played Spence on King of Queens, as well as appearing on Seinfeld, Reaper, Aqua Teen, Hunger Force, and Tim and Eric's awesome show, Great Job. Patton provided the voice for Remy the Rat in the Pixar film Ratatouille. And he's appeared in more than 20 films altogether, including Magnolia, Starsky and Hutch, and Reno 911 Miami. In 2009, Patton won critical acclaim in Robert Spiegel's feature film Big Fan, which made its debut at the Sundance Film Festival. And he's currently filming a new film, Young Adult, starring opposite Charlize Theron. Pat. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Paul Levitz. Paul Levitz and Geoff Johns and Jim Lee and Patton Oswalt.
Oh, look, I'm sorry. I took a traffic gamble tonight. I lost so horribly. I made the dumbest decision leaving Silver Lake. There was a hipster spill on Rowena, and there was flannel everywhere, and I've never seen paramedics rolling their eyes like that. Like, people still listen to the White Stripes. It was horrible. So thank you for being patient, and thank you, Claudia, for the intro. I'm going to bring out our panel really quickly, but I just want to say that I was very flattered to get asked to do this. I don't really follow comic books. If you know anything about me, you know, it's all just mixed martial arts and tanning. That's what I do. But I say, you know what, I'll just roll the dice and maybe learn something new. And especially the 75 years of DC Comics, my goodness, all the characters they've brought us, like Flying Man and Mr. Bat Guy. So, I just realized I could have sat in that chair and talked into that mic, so I'm gonna, ladies and gentlemen, applaud while I walk over to my chair. By the way, if anyone, I know that a lot of you probably had tickets to go see the midnight screening of Yogi Bear, and if I've messed up those plans by being late, I will refund you. All right, so we're gonna, oh my God, this book, a great airplane read. If you are traveling this Christmas, just tuck this in your carry-on, and just, you know, try to get a center seat and buy the two ones on either side, and enjoy this one. Oh my God. And if you have any stubborn bed bugs, boom, how you doing? Yes. And you can also hollow this out to hide guns or actor Justin Long. Why not? So, all right. So let's bring out our panel. I'm gonna go. Not only is Paul Levitz the guy who put together this book and wrote it here, but two amazing comics professionals who actually, as we'll see when I talk to them, and I'm going to be amazing tonight. So get your Twitter feeds open. These two, I think, both writing-wise and art-wise, really embody kind of 75 years worth of tradition they can kind of blithely pass off in their work if you know them. The first guy I'm going to bring on is actually a friend of mine, and I've been such a fan of his work. If anyone has been reading his recent run on both The Flash and Green Lantern, which he basically took the Green Lantern, who is in the basic primary color wheel of the DC universe, Green Lantern is like one of the 5 colors, and he completely exploded that guy's universe in such a of course kind of way. I don't want to spoil it. If you're reading the books, you know what I'm talking about. If not, go get them. There's a whole arc called Darkest Night, and has now gone into Brightest Day, and it's brilliant. And he has way too many other credits for me to roll off here, but he's one of my favorites. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns coming out here. Geoff Johns. There you go. How you feeling?
Great.
Good. All right. Why am I eating up time? All right. Our second guest is a artist. One of the he is not a friend of mine, but I am a fan of his. This guy, I can't even. Where would you even start on this guy's credits?
Wildcats. No, X-Men.
Wildcats, X-Men. An amazing run on Superman, Batman. No, on the new on Batman.
Superman and Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it called Superman and Batman?
There was Superman and there was Batman.
The Batman run was amazing.
The Hush Batman.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was incredible. Let's give us like 20 minutes to talk about this. So, also, remember the one where he's fighting Killer Croc and the guy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, I too many credits to roll off, but the amazing Jim Lee. Jim Lee, ladies and gentlemen. Yep. There we go. Nice. Okay. And then finally, the guy who, good. I mean, look, he did this. He did this. So that should be his intro. That'll be his credits. This guy's background. Boom! It's literally that sound. Could you, Jim? You're an artist. Pick up that water. Thank you. Come on, mise en place. You got to know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul Levitz. Paul Levitz. I'm going to start with Paul, and then I'm going to use these guys as sidebars when you talk about some of the writing and the characters and the art and stuff like that. Tell me the background of this book. You told me that DC approached you to go and what was the process like to put something like this together?
When DC's 75th anniversary was coming up, the company said, how are we going to celebrate? And one of the projects was the idea of doing a commemorative book. You do that every 20 or 30 years, somewhere in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them, you put together the 20 familiar pictures, first cover of Action 1, things like that.
Yeah.
Write down the basic hagiography, and you're kind of finished with it. DC made a deal with Taschen, who has incredible courage as a publisher and does all these just incredibly weird sizes and shapes. You know, a crate of Muhammad Ali.
Yes.
That, only he could carry, probably. So
Taschen is a publisher that clearly hates walnuts. They do not like walnuts in their shells.
And small animals.
And small animals, yes.
You just shouldn't have a house pet around books like this. So they did the deal with Taschen, a wonderful art director named Josh Baker, who's hiding here, an editor named Nina Wiener, got the assignment. And the team asked me if I would write it, but I had a day job at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I can't. And then when I stopped doing the day job, they still hadn't found a writer, so they said, if you can play catch up and get this done, really quickly, Paul, you can still get in on the fun.
So you cranked this out then? Was this like this wasn't a weird can you have it to us over the weekend? What are you doing? Seriously. Just TiVo your stuff and watch it later.
It wasn't quite that bad,
No,
but it definitely was under the gun. It was, can you compress 75 years of history, 40,000 comic books, millions of comic book pages into a story in a few months of solid writing and then a few months of polish after that?
And then, so you talked about earlier the iconic DC, images, the cover images. So you wanted to go deeper than that, obviously, and kind of delve into the stuff that normally doesn't get brought to light and show how those iconic images were arrived at from earlier DC comics. Was that sort of your aim with this, or?
The goal was to make this a museum in a book. And part of that is you want to have some stuff that no one's ever seen. When I went to see the Tim Burton exhibit that was at MoMA in New York, which was awesome, and I've known Tim for whatever it is, over 20 years, I guess. There were facets of his career that I had never seen before, sketches and things like that. We wanted, really on both sides, Taschen and DC, to capture that same feeling and show, here's an original sketch from something from before you were born. Here's how the artist developed it. When you look at an original page of Dark Knight, in the original black and white, and you see Frank's work, the pencil's still there in the background, Klaus's inks over it. Probably everyone in this room has pored over that book at some point, fallen in love with it, but there's only 2 or 3 people in this room who ever had a chance to see those original black and whites before the color went on, see how it evolves, and it's a transformational process to see that, and we wanted to, in that way, kind of invite you into the process, invite you into seeing how the magic was made.
Wow, and the 2 people who have actually seen that have been sealed in Mylar for protection, so just to let you know, they're not going to age. They'll still be around. That leads me to a question to Jim. Have you ever, because you do really detailed pages, the amount of from the, have you ever, there have to have been pages in your past there that either the ink or the colors obscure details that you thought were, but that was crucial, and why did you ink, or like, has that ever happened to you, or in your career, now that he's mentioned that, or?
Where I've drawn something and it was obliterated by an author writing a lot of word balloons. Marvel stuff, though.
Drink your water, Geoff. Just drink your water, all right?
No, they always place them right where you want them. So it's a little different now because it's all done on layers. I mean, before you would actually draw and they would actually erase the art and
I'm sorry, I didn't
to
know
put
that.
the words. I don't know why you need them because if you do your job well, you can tell a story with just pictures silently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fighting words, yeah.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
You're outnumbered here, Jim.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Geoff, you'll have a chance to hop on the bitter bus later. Just let it happen.
but today, I mean, everything's drawn and they electronically or digitally put the lettering on top of the pages. So the art is still pristine and perfect and just the way God intended. So not me, but.
No, yeah, nice save. Now, also, this many, I mean, all of the constant mythology and backstory and retconning that goes on in a universe this huge and with this many little side paths. That's not a word, for God's sakes. But Geoff, you seem to, especially in a lot of your books and a lot of you are very adept at calling up some very kind of obscure details or precedents that have been set in books before that you're working on now. To kind of there's that sort of feeling of I know the whole history here and I can pull from that. I mean, is it? I hate to ask, is that something that you study or is it just something that stayed with you? Is it a world that stays with you easier than maybe other people do?
It's a world that stays with me easier than anything else does.
Oh.
When I was growing up reading comics, everything I read I absorbed and draw from that. I research, but I already kind of memorized it all.
Right. So were you the guy that was going, Green Arrow has actually fought Despero before. I don't know why he's saying we've met for the first time. Excuse me, but were you that kind of guy?
No,
okay.
I wouldn't say it out loud.
Oh, but in your head you'd be sitting there seething, obviously.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest? I hate to ask a general question like this, but for you in your research, what were some of the biggest surprises that you ran into, either in terms of stuff that people don't know about characters, or maybe some attempts that DC had made in other books that really didn't go and maybe ended too soon? Or does that make sense?
Some of it was just when you stack the history in order, you look and you find things out about people you knew, people you worked with and loved, and you didn't realize. My first mentor in the business really was Joe Orlando, one of the great editors and artists. And it was only
mentioned by David the Watchman, but anyway, go ahead.
It was only in doing the book that I realized that he was the first artist to ever create a new DC book who wasn't already a DC staffer. on Swing with Scooter and Inferior 5. Everybody else who started a DC title had already been doing work for the house. He was the first guy to be imported whole hog and do something. It's like, wow, he may never have realized that. But you get a perspective on it when you sort of put the pieces together.
Who was so you actually got to talk to some of these professionals, and what was like one of the more startling stories that you heard, or like a weird, maybe a near miss, or a...
You know, my whole life has been around these guys, and I had 3 different people, all of whom I think are pretty honest and solid, explain to me that they were the person who had extended the art on Action 1 to change it from a newspaper strip into a comic book. And Howie Chaykin used the line that my generation of comic book creator came in at the end of the beginning. So we got to hear the stories about the earliest days from the people who had worked on the books. Too foolish to write down all the stories or record them, but you sort of imbibe them and then try to translate some sense of that history in a project like this and give you a sense of how it all fit together.
Were there anything, especially in looking at the Golden Age and Silver Age timelines that gatefolds, were there details that you put together in your research that you had mapped it out, and these are the facts I have, and I've double checked it, and yet when you submitted it, someone at DC was like, oh, actually that's not true, or they had a dispute, or...
We have sitting in the audience Mark Wade, who helped with any number of the captions, and in particular Mark has an extraordinarily good eye for spotting the artists and looking to see, no, that one wasn't inked by Stan Kay, that's a George Klein over Kurt Swan drawing, and he saved us from any number of errors in the process.
Oh no, I agree, Mark's pathetic. So if there is Mark's another guy like Geoff that seems in your books not to, but you seem to be able to pull up the most obscure details, which all, of course, check out if you go back and look at it. It's like, oh, actually, yeah, Animal Man did do that. So I guess, yeah, that's press. Yeah, stand up. Let the people look at you, Mark. Come on, don't be shy. Look at him. Gaze at him. Nice.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
No, what's interesting is, you're working with, like you said, at the end of the beginning. I mean, back then, from what I understand, they really just did things kind of willy-nilly. Like they said, hey, gorillas are popular, so let's just put gorillas on the cover and come up with the stories afterwards. And then you get cut forward to Geoff Johns and all these completionists and people that know everything about comics and arguing about, well, this character can't punch this guy with his right hand, he's left-handed, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. When did it move from being something that was just kind of, to give an art example, Vinnie Coletta, when he worked at Marvel, if he had a deadline, he would literally draw, like people on a beach, all these characters that the penciler put in, I heard that he would just draw a huge beach ball in the foreground and just obliterate half the panel and just finish it. And that was the thinking back then. It's just like, it has to get done. This is something that entertains kids, and you push
Vinny
it
did
out.
that at DC too.
Right. Okay. Right.
Wonderfully
beach
talented
balls.
man.
Right. So, and I love his work. And so to me, it just seemed like it went from this period where people really just, put Batman on the moon. That's cool. To the point where now it's like, oh, Batman would never, leave Gotham City. So.
I think it's really the '70s generation in comics, because you have the first generation really of writers and editors coming into the field who had grown up as comic book fans, and they felt it was important to pull the stuff together. And there were guys like Mark Grunwald over at Marvel, who unfortunately passed away too young, who really codified lots of the things and put the logic together. Because absolutely what you're talking about, the first generation guys, they're just telling stories, and they didn't remember from month to month what they did. Kanigher did the origin of Wonder Woman twice in 4 issues, and neither one had any resemblance to each other. Wonderful writer, did brilliant things, but the assumption was that comics were for kids, and it was a casual purchase, and nobody would buy 2 issues in a row, so you didn't have to worry about that. And then suddenly a bunch of us showed up, and we cared about these things desperately. It all had to fit together, and no, in issue 79. And for a number of years, there was a tremendous pressure to dot the I's and cross the T's. And then we kind of reached maybe a healthier balance where it became, well, there's ways of telling different aspects of the story, and you can do a Dark Knight Returns without it necessarily having to be the absolute destiny of Batman. It's what could happen to Batman. And that became more liberating in the 1980s, and you had a broader range of story. And there's always a creative tension. You want, and I think all of the writers and artists share this, you want to preserve the magic that is the essential of the character, but you want to do something that's new and fresh and what you're adding to it. And that's impossible to express scientifically, but you know it when it's working. And on the really good days, and we've all had the blessing of having those days from time to time in our career, you do something that's a reach and it's wild, and it just works, and you know it's working while you do it. And those were always the great moments in the office when the project was going down. We have a couple of the editors of Watchmen sitting in the room, and both of them, Barbara Kiesel and Len Wein, both of them would run down the hall with pages of Watchmen every time a package would come in from Dave Gibbons, because you just knew something was going on here. And those are the great moments along the way, when you're breaking the rules and you're making new rules in the process.
I'd also say something about the history, like drawing from the history. It's not about connecting the dots so much as it is, I mean, for me personally, is looking at what would a character evolve if they had went through these experiences. Like, so looking at Hal Jordan, what he would, if he actually went through all these experiences, where would his journey go next? How would you evolve that character arc?
Intergalactic mass murderer.
Yeah, how do you get out of that?
That's where everybody's heading. Come on, don't be too harsh on him. Let me ask the two youngsters a quick question, because you've just got a few weeks left. But these two, I've seen the X-rays, people. As he knows, he's cool. What were the two things in looking at this book and knowing about the stuff you were just describing of how it used to get done, and that the beach ball trick? Yes, it's sort of a cheat, but it's also kind of brilliant. That hey, I hopefully that I would think of something. What was one thing about being a writer or being an artist back then that you're actually sad that you missed? And I know that it was as hard as it was back then, as crappy as it was for writers, as crappy as it was for artists, as horrible as they treated people. What was something that you still like, oh, I wish I could have been there to experience this aspect of it?
Sales.
Like, Jim, would you ever have liked to actually been in an office at the big slanted table with everyone else around you, and you're all...
With my necktie.
Yeah, we were just talking about
my pipe. I mean,
Yeah.
the pictures, I love them. They're all like dressed to work at Wall Street.
Yeah.
Drawing funny books. So.
It was like Mad Men, but they were drawing Flash.
Yeah. Was there a lot of drinking in the office back then too? Was that a separate? Like, I assume cigarette smoking was pretty common.
The writers were a pretty heavy bunch of drinkers. The artists, there were a few of them who we kind of lost to that along the way, but the artists would go bad faster drinking. The writers could sort of hang out at the bar and then sober up enough to...
Are you saying that writers can drink better than artists? Is that what you're telling me?
In the 1950s. I'm not talking about the current generation.
Look, if an artist, if you draw a third arm on Superman, that's like, but if you spell Kal-El wrong, it's like, all right, just correct that.
It's a little more obvious.
Yeah, you can get away with it. So.
True origin of Bizarro.
Yeah. Now, this is going to be a really lengthy, convoluted question, but Paul, you were mentioning how back then it was there wasn't a lot of continuity. It was gorillas are popular, boom, put them on the cover. No. Now, as much as some of that's gone away, in some ways it has not. And I point to, like, now with DC and Marvel with their own studios trying to get their properties made. If you remember when Batman Begins came out, it was very, very dark and very, very grim, and it made so much money. And it felt like, to me, the studio went, all right, Batman was dark and grim, so Superman, dark and grim, because that works. So it just feels like that pattern still persists, but on a much bigger macro level with some of their properties, because now they're dealing with much bigger stakes if they're turning these properties into movies and TV shows.
You always have that in the popular culture. I mean, we're in a moment of zombies, and is there a direct line of connection between the revival of dead people in Blackest Night and Walking Dead and Marvel zombies? Is it it's not that someone necessarily sits there and comes up with a battle plan and says, market research says zombies outsell gorillas this week. But ideas get in the public consciousness. And however those memes move around, they inspire us, they fascinate us, and we start exploring stuff like that. And writers develop them, artists develop them, play with them. Some of them work, and the ones that work tend to be catching.
I disagree. So anyway, that was such a great answer. I don't know what to say. How do you think a lot of the kind of the golden age guys would feel if they now saw, that the Dark Knight is a $500 million grossing Academy Award winning film that were there plans back? I've seen fake posters for like an Orson Welles version of the Batman with James Cagney as the Riddler and like just stuff like that. Were they trying to develop this stuff back then, or did they just think maybe this will be like fun little movies here? There's no one ever imagined it would become this deep mythology like it is, or
I don't think most of the people, other than the original creators themselves, believed that it would last that long. The business people certainly didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the writers and artists, Siegel and Schuster, were sure that Superman was going to be an important part of the culture for generations. Bob Kane passionately believed Batman would be in the movies someday. He delighted in going to the movie premieres. He just saw this as the fulfillment of his fantasies as a kid. The creators were way ahead of the business in all of that.
well, and then my next question then is to no, go ahead.
They used to destroy the artwork too, right? I mean,
Oh,
they
sure.
used to throw it out and just.
And we didn't keep negatives. I mean, nobody thought it was worth keeping negatives for the first 15 years that we were published.